All right, so I've thought about it, and especially on your side because you'll have a different perspective. Now, when you talk about the greatest rock bands in history, I've come to the bands, not musician. You know, especially the UK, you've got the Stones, you've got the Beatles, you've got the Kinks, you've got Pink Floyd, you've got Black Sabbath. If you were to pick the who you think is, and it's not talent wise, I guess it would be popularity and everything involved. Who would you consider the great American rock band?
Wow. Yeah.
I've got mine, but I'll let you. I'll let you. I mean, it's a tough one.
It is, yeah, because I'm not really a huge Springsteen fan. If you include the E
Yeah,
Street
right,
Band in it, I mean, he's okay.
right.
He's
I
peaks
know
and
that
troughs.
there's a lot like that, and I
Yeah,
know I've gotten answers from a lot of different people, and it depends kind of where you come from, and what you came up with. I've heard Springsteen, and I just think bands because I always think of like the big groups. Um, but who do you think would exemplify the American rock style on a big platform that would compare to the five I just said on top of you know, numerous others that came out of the UK.
yeah. I mean, the band that's still going now, I think after 20, 25 years, is probably Foo Fighters. But yeah, that they maybe exemplify a lot of rock and roll in its truest form. They play 2.5 hour
Yeah,
shows, and they're experimenting with different sounds and stuff in the last couple of albums. But I think if you bought a ticket for one of their gigs, I'm pretty sure you knew what you would be getting, and you
like
would probably leave not disappointed.
yeah, I kind of thought if I asked that's where I think a lot of people go there. I mean, I've heard people say Guns N' Roses.
Oh, that was my
Uh,
other one. you know?
okay, yeah, Guns N' Roses. I mean, I scoured, and the two that I came up with would be one would be Creedence Clearwater Revival,
Yeah.
um, and then I would say the Beach Boys.
Really interesting mixing because CCR, it was like John Fogerty, and then he fell out with his brother and all that stuff, and the
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
the deep ramifications of that band. Yeah, they really run deep. The dislike for one another.
Yeah, I mean, and they only put together really three albums,
Yeah,
and
it's
the
incredible.
sound, the sound that they came up with, and I think the way that they were attached to, especially like the Vietnam War and stuff. I mean, I guess you could put in the Doors, perhaps, um, but I always thought about it. It's really really tricky because you've got these bands. I mean, I guess the staying power also matters. So I mean, all of the bands that I listed from the UK were around for at least 10 years, right, if not longer. Whereas like America, you have this 3 year, maybe 4 years, Guns N' Roses, Nirvana. I mean, the Doors were what, one album, two album. Hendrix was one or two albums, and so yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know people would say Bon Jovi, Aerosmith, but I just always wonder on the other side. To me, Aerosmith is extremely corny, and I wouldn't put them anywhere close to it.
I don't know if you read the recent story about the drummer in Aerosmith. I know that there's a drummer joke coming up, but literally they made the drummer, so the original guy's Joey something his name is, I think. They made him re-audition for his own spot in the band.
Under for
Yeah,
what reason?
yeah. So they played. Did they play the Grammys or the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, whatever it was, something like this, in some other big award show? And
Mm,
late last year, he injured himself. He fell, or he was skiing, or he's just old, whatever it was. I don't know.
right,
But yeah,
right.
so he was hurt and he couldn't play. Then he kind of got into rehabilitation physically wise. But then the band said, yeah, that he wasn't playing the parts right. So his drum tech played them. But on top of that, just to rub insult to injury, was he actually had to pay the drum tech's fees. So it was
Jeez,
something like 20 grand a week or 10 grand a show. I mean, it was
that's
ridiculous. Huh?
That's when you've taken fame and fortune and went a little too far with
It's the
it.
original
Oh, I
drummer
was going
of the band.
right.
50 years he's been in
Yeah,
the band. Right? So you're just like,
right. I mean,
oh.
that's yeah. I mean, for me, I'm always. I mean, the music is forefront, but I always like the backstories. So I mean, I'm always reading, and trying to find out, like the Smiths when you talk about financials and what those two guys did. Johnny Marr's great, but I mean, him and Morrissey treated the bass player and the drummer like crap.
Yeah, big time.
The one thing I was thinking, and since you're talking about injured drummers, I was going through in my head, and the other morning I was thinking of some groups, I came up with, and my brother he's the same age as you, and so Iron Maiden and Black Sabbath, especially Ozzy. I still remember those album covers when I was in kindergarten. But what was the temperature of Def Leppard in the UK? Because that's one of the bands that I always levitated to when I was in elementary school. I don't know why. But I mean, the amount of hits that they had, was that an American thing or was that a UK thing as well?
Because they started maybe in the late 70s,
Yeah, it
early
was.
80s,
And they
probably, like Pyromania and
yeah.
Dive Deeper, whatever that album's called, or something to do with,
And,
it's got like a springboard on the cover or something, yeah?
and then I
And
think the one that came, maybe that's the name of the album, isn't it? Or is it,
yeah.
yeah. I
But
mean, they,
then he had his accident. The drummer had his
right,
the car crash as they were recording or beginning to record or beginning to write the Hysteria album. And then of course there's this huge 4 or 5 year gap between one part ending and another part beginning. But yeah, they were. I guess it was under
I
the
mean,
banner of new wave of British heavy metal, right? This kind of genre where you had Motorhead and Iron Maiden and yeah, everything in
right, right.
between. And then from there, it just went total Hollywood, right? It just went,
Yeah.
we sound like this, and now we're just going to make it not sound like this.
Well, because I always wonder, like, I mean, were they regarded or esteemed as being, more of a rock band, or was it more of just kind of that genre, that genre of music at that time? I mean, a lot of them are thought of as just kind of, pop kind of rock. I mean, you saw Motley Crue; it happened to them. They came out hard, and then they turned into, um,
Cartoon
what they
characters.
yeah, Poison, and then you started getting even worse with Cinderella and
Oh,
Warren.
yeah.
But I mean, did Def Leppard have any? I mean, I brought that up with Genesis, right? Like, I know there's mixed messages with Genesis. Some people love them, and some people think they're the worst band in history. Uh,
Old stuff good, Phil Collins stuff not so good.
See, and that's the thing. I mean, I always go through, and just to bring it back with the art, I mean, like Peter Gabriel, I still remember seeing, Shock the Monkey and
Yeah.
Sledgehammer, and even Genesis when they did Land of Confusion. I remember seeing those 85, 86 on MTV, and those being like a huge kind of, I don't know, just the visual side of it. And so, like, Genesis, when it got to Phil Collins making his more what do you do, The Lion King, I think, one of those soundtracks for Disney. But yeah, I mean, it was kind of like me growing up with U2. The first thing I ever heard was Joshua Tree. Now my brother hated that album. And then when I got older, I got to listen to October and was it War?
Warren
Uh,
Boy.
yeah, boy, yeah. And so, like, I was like, oh, that's why people, you hear when they were doing like Zoo and all that stuff, and they must have lost a huge fan base because it went from being some kind of like I don't even know what you would call it, just an indie rock band to
A bit of
being,
new wave as well.
yeah, yeah, right. And then they turned into sort of like a cliche of themselves wearing sunglasses and black leather.
And two
And so,
hundred
but I think,
dollar concert tickets, you know.
yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I think they're still esteemed as being a great rock band, but I think they lost a lot of that true. They're not in the realm of a Led Zeppelin or a Rolling Stones because they just got a little too far away from where it started, like the Police and Sting, that kind
Yeah,
of thing.
exactly.
So,
One
I
of the
just wonder
things
with
though
that.
about no, sorry. One of the things about Def Leppard though was definitely their first two albums or three albums that were recorded before they were big. In
Yeah,
that sense, yeah, they were definitely more of a British sounding heavy metal band. Not as heavy as Maiden or Sabbath or anything, but this kind of new wave of British heavy metal. Hysteria onwards, it just became this kind of, well, how many overdubs do you need? It's like, it's
I mean,
how many
yeah,
guitar tracks can you fit? The guy's like, well, all of the guitar tracks. It's,
maybe she like me. Yeah, like I said, I mean, it was kind of interesting growing up at the time of MTV coming on the television and it just kind of changing the dynamic of music. And that was kind of what I was coming up with, and everything that I liked, my brother would be like, "Oh, it's garbage. It's rubbish. I can't stand that. You don't know what they used to sound like." And it just changed everything to, especially on the rock side. But then it was also interesting that, right after Guns N' Roses, being 14 when Nirvana came out, and then this whole brand new thing changed as well, to being a lot more back to probably what it was when in the gritty days, and so,
yeah.
And you see this course over and over again. Something gets big, and then you have Bush, by the end of the grunge generation, of this group that found a sound and overproduced it, and it ran its course, and then something new came up. But yeah, so that would be that was my question of just like who. I mean, I guess I don't know if there was a resentment for the Foo Fighters. Dave Grohl's great. I love when he's playing on other people. He plays with Queen of the Stone Age and stuff like that. But I felt like the Foo Fighters, it was just lacking something. I don't know. There's just something there. I mean, I respect it. I've tried to listen. There's a couple songs that I really enjoy. I just couldn't latch onto it for some reason. I don't know why.
I think it's one of those bands that you might kind of drop in and drop out of if I can't listen to them all day. The kind of shouty bit that he does quite a lot is, it's a bit repetitive after a while,
Yeah, I mean, the major ones, Queen of the Stone Age is probably, that's a good listen. I always try to find new stuff, and so, I've talked to quite a few people, and I think we're under the assumption that rock is dead, and I don't know what the course of it's going to take. I don't know if it's going to end up being a blues jazz type of idea where it's these smoky bars, and it stays underground and still respected. But I don't know. Do you see a resurgence of rock being the popular music again?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because the Korean band you mentioned earlier, like the trio, there's maybe a good example of what you don't automatically think of, or anyone who's never been to South Korea or lived there would never put these two things together, this kind of three-piece acid rock, Korean kids, young guys, just giving it everything they've got, and it's maybe in this respect it's not, but yeah, the whole kind of club culture and dance music and EDM or whatever genres we're getting into is probably here for the long run now.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, I guess it's just seeing music change, but I mean, I guess all genres fade away and something new comes in, and rock was probably the longest, at least in pop, popular culture, that the longevity of it was quite amazing. Whereas like disco came and went, and soul and funk, and they still exist, just not in the mainstream. And rock, for some reason, really did well at dominating for 60 years. And I don't know. It's quite interesting. I would hate to try to start to get into music today, especially being in a band, because you're not going to find a lot of places to get out there and actually make a living off of it. I don't think, if that was your goal,
I guess this is a podcast for another day, but I met someone at New Year, New Year. And it's a boyfriend of a friend of mine, and he's a professional musician, but he's a German guy, but he works in a show band, or they play carnivals and this kind of stuff, and he plays his friends in the band as well. And there was a lot of stuff. So we we'll get together sometime, hopefully, and put something on the record, as it were. But here's some good stories to tell about how to make money as a musician, and it's I think He does some songwriting and not copywriting. What do you call it? Publishing, this kind of thing.
Okay, right. Yeah, because I teach at arts high school right now. I'll be leaving to go to university next semester, but we have art students, but we have some musicians as well, classically trained, and then some that are doing more like pop music and stuff like that. And I wish them the best. I try to help those guys out and girls out and show them progression of music and try to help them, but I don't envy their desire because I just feel it's pretty hard. It's a hard sell out there. And I'll play them stuff from my teenage days, and they're just looking at me like, "What is this?" It's just not palatable, I guess. Which on the flip side is I can still listen to some of the newer stuff now. And I understand it. So that's the one thing that I still pride, and you probably do too, is I never do I'm too old for that. I'm always trying to find something that's new, that's good,
Well, I went to a gig here in Dortmund about 3 weeks ago, I think it was, and a friend of mine, a drummer friend of mine, was playing in 3 of the 5 bands that were on the list, like what do you call it? 5 bands playing. He was in 3 of them. And I got up to the venue. It's this kind of small club in Dortmund called Recorder. And you go in the door, and there's the bar. And then you go down the stairs into the cellar or the basement. And this is where the bands were. So I go in down the stairs. I've got my beers with me and stuff, and the place is packed, and of course everyone's a foot taller than me. So I'm like, at least the music's loud. So all right, fine. And then my friend was playing in this band, and I didn't see him, but anyway, I could hear him. It sounded great. And he didn't play in the next band anyway, but it was this kind of really mad fusion of punk, post-punk, and a lot of shouting and screaming and stuff like that. Right. Really kind of aggressive. There was a female singer in one of the bands and stuff. The actual sound of the venue was great, but the vocals weren't loud enough, so there was a lot of real screaming going on. It was quite interesting. Right. But at least the place was full. It was 100 people, maybe more, so in this kind of little venue, and it was great.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we were talking about here, going to that venue, and I can't remember the name of it. It was on the outskirts between Sinchon and Hongdae. It was just this tiny, small hole in the wall, and the cover was, 15 to get in. And the way we looked at it was, here we are trying to support some of these guys. You walk down, there was probably 25 people in there. I mean, and these guys were playing like they were playing to a sold out thousand plus crowd. And so the thing that I walked away was like, you know what? They're maybe it keeps something going, right? Because I mean, you saw the music scene here, being here as long. I mean, it's such a chokehold on what gets put out there, and for these kids, I'm sure their parents are screaming at them every day, get a real job. But yeah, so, I mean, and I think, probably when you were coming up and when I was coming up, especially, everybody wanted a band in the 90s. We had 5 bands. I came from a town of 35,000 people, and there was at least 5 bands, high school bands, right? I mean, it was like the thing to do. And, I mean, I guarantee you're hard pressed to find any now. So like I said, we were talking about Memphis in the early 2000s, and there was I'll throw that out there. I don't know if you ever heard of the Lost Souls, but there was a musician, Jay Retard. He passed away in the early 2000s, but they coined him as, he was on CNN when he died. They coined him as like the underground punk rock Memphis king. And the dude recorded over probably 400 or 500 songs in his lifetime. And he died when he was in his early 20s. And we were talking about that scene in Memphis in the early 2000s, and it carried, because I know kids these days, 19, 18 years old, that still, you knew who he was? I'm like, I met him a couple times. Oh my God, treating him like he's another, Kurt Cobain or Jim Morrison. I'm like,
yeah.
And so I never would have expected that to carry on 20 years later because it was just what it was. But yeah, so I mean, I guess it still peaks through. I just feel like the cycle's really quick now. You get
Yeah,
1 year or 2 year of fame, the
that's it.
K-pop stuff.
Yeah, we live in interesting times, Nick. It's not just yeah, the old days. You and your buddies, you practice in the garage or the basement, and then you take it to the next step. You want to play somewhere, and then one thing leads to another,
Yeah,
and then you break up, and then you start another band, and
yeah, right. Yeah, like I said, it's kind of interesting, and I mean, I always put those two together with the art and the music. So, like I said, I mean, it was all quite influential to get. You're a bit older, so you were listening to cassettes and records, and you didn't have the visual to go along with it. Whereas when I was coming up, I mean, you had to have a good video with artistic talents behind it to go with the music. And so, you know, I remember videos and the artwork that went along with them, even if the song wasn't good. And a lot of musicians found their way, like Bjork. I think stands out the most when it came to creating an amazing visual behind the music. And so, it's just always tied together, I think. And so, yeah, like I said,
interesting you point that out about Bjork and so on, because that whole Icelandic or even the mainland European music scene, there's a whole plethora of bands and musicians that we don't really hear of in the West or in the English-speaking world. So there's a whole other thing going on that we probably don't get. We could get access to it easy enough through Spotify and all the other YouTube and whatnot, but yeah,
Right.
do we really know it's there?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing here is that, I think Korea is similar in the sense of, I mean, nobody's really putting out anything in English, especially on the underground side. And so, and also all the places that they're playing, there's no advertisement unless you know somebody. And I knew somebody and he's like, we're going to go to this place and check this out. And yeah, so, I mean, I think that's everywhere. I mean, and that's the thing about these days is it can probably be a little demoralizing is that you have the whole world at your fingertips now. It's just how do you connect to it? And, I kind of wish I had that when we were teenagers growing up because, here we are recording on a 4-track, putting it on a cassette tape and sending it away to some record company and waiting for a letter in the mail. Whereas now you can do all of that. And again, that's the pro, but also the con is just there's so much of it. And then, like you said, with the language barrier, I think too, it's hard to always connect what is good. And I guess that's what makes great performers, artists great is that connection and the networking that they figure out how to get to. That's the step that I try to work on.
Right
I'm not
on.
a good self-promoter. But yeah,
Well, hopefully we've put that to good use. Then getting your garbage art project and one thing and another out there. Nick, thanks very much for your time. It's been fantastic sharing the last hour or so with you about